for the poor light. I've been pretty much sat down today, just resting up, and positioned correctly hasn't been possible, so I'm rolling with this as it is. It's time to talk day from Mind, and this is the third I made last night and I wasn't able to do it. Made another one this morning, and by the time I got through the context of my life, it wasn't really there wasn't anything left to give in relationship to time to talk specifically. I've not really read up on the campaign, but it seems pretty self-explanatory. Talk about your problems in relationship to mental health, and I think the first place I start with this video is why I feel compelled to go along with this campaign and make this video when I don't really ever do that, even if it's really try to stay focused on doing what I'm doing. But with this campaign, it feels appropriate to make a video and join in. And the reason is because through my psychosis and through my spiritual application to life, I get strange and weird ideas about society and life. I'm also self-diagnosed autistic, so I'm not quite on the same social what's the word, when you resonate with somebody empathically or mentally on a certain vibrational level, I've always lacked that knowledge in the first instance, and it hasn't stopped me. I've overcome a lot of my obstacles, but a lot of things about the world still confuse me. And I've used my spiritual awareness, and of the last few years, not my psychosis in the first instance, because my psychosis in the first instance, an LSD show for all intensive purposes, it's wild and insane, but it's my my awareness of myself and my psychosis, and my ability to discern life and possible truths from it. And like National Vegetarian Day and National Vegan Day and all of these sort of days, campaigns and days, often go beyond the society understand from my understanding. What I mean by that is, for instance, Time to Talk. Its topic is mental health. Now, the importance of it is what's in question. In other words, sometimes these campaigns and these days are very important to what I view as the spiritual consciousness of the world. And in that, I mean, there seems to be something beyond the campaign or something beyond the day that gets people to come together and really, one way or another, in a conscious manner, allow for people to partake in their own way, in their own relationship to life, and in relationship to the energy and consciousness of that campaign and day. So for instance, time to talk is time to talk about your health. And my life is volatile, my life is hard, my life puts a lot of annoyance on other people because I scream and shout. In terms of my mental health, the main observable symptom. And obviously if you're living next door to people, people can hear your screams because I've got a loud voice. And it's a lot of time, most days of late. I'm a burden to society. So this day, this campaign rolled past and it flashed on my screen. And the first thing I felt about it was fear. I felt fear about this campaign because I'm aware if I don't partake on this level, which I'm doing now, it's all too very easy for the police to turn up at my door and want to quit for the disturbance, the disturbance upon my neighbours, the amount of phone calls I've had in the past where police have come to my door because, and as much as the police have always been very pleasant and very appropriate to a certain extent in communicating to me, and I always respond in the best way I can, the most respectful way I can, so to speak. But just imagine you're trying to deal with your life, you're trying to cook your dinner, or you're trying to manage your mental health, and you have a knock at the door from the police. And for myself, it took a long while to get used to police turning up at my door at any time. But in honesty, it's not just them turning up at my door, because each time they do come to I have to expend a lot of energy. I have to show that respect back. I have to be aware of my actions in life in terms of communicating to them, one, to show madness and all of the screams of all of the hysteria and to a certain level insanity. I still possess a certain level of sanity and coherence. And I'm well aware if I don't show that in the moment, it's all too easy for them to section me. So if there's a knock at the door by the police, I have to dance. It's like Back to the Future when they're shooting his feet. That's my feeling. It's not really the same intention, but in actuality, that is what's happening. I have to do that for my life. So as a result, on a spiritual level to the world and society, I decided, right, I just can't deal with police turning up at my door, the risk of sectioning and facing the possibility of medication again. And I'll be proactive, and I'll in a different tone to where I am at the moment with life, which is quite depressed. So I'm doing my best to keep it on the level, very clear, very to the point, and that really brings me on to the second aspect that really troubles me about my mental health, and that is Now, a lot of the people that work in the mental health system are really nice people, but from my perspective, the only people that count are the consultants, the people that can take your liberty and freedom away. And again, it's a dance for me. I have to prove something each time. And it's unfortunate because I've got a past of self-harm and suicidal attempts. And if anything has come from the mental health system, is to teach me those aren't appropriate behaviours, and I've learnt my lesson there. So there's been an element of good that's come to it. I can't argue that point. I can see the consciousness behind it. I can see when you're self-harming and you're suicidal, a raised awareness of life and what it means is to really hammer it home to an individual. Look, that's not appropriate behaviour. We're going to give you medication to prevent that happening in the immediate. And obviously the staff at the hospital and admissions and the consultants and any program that's put for you together when you go back into the community is meant to really address those matters. But the last 2 admissions to hospital, I think they were both half involuntary, and they both resulted in a sectioning. And regardless if you're voluntary or sectioned, and that's how you end up in hospital, it's a different experience. Voluntarily, if you go to hospital voluntarily, essentially you're allowed in and out whenever you choose, and that helps. It's like being able to go outside for a smoke if you're a smoker, or go to the park and sit in nature. A wonder for your mental health. That's the big place where the mental health system fails. It's like we have this free, life-giving source, nature, and it's unfortunate most are structured in such a way where it's all concrete and glass and prison. Still able to have a prison greenery inside of it. So maybe that's something for the future. But it's the main point I'm trying to make is from my perspective is a shock to normal people. You're experiencing a lot of people in an enclosed space that don't go out all the time with very limited activities to be done. Hygiene is always questionable, not because there's of that, but because you've got 30 people with different mental health conditions in varying levels. So you might go into the toilet one day and the previous person's put toilet paper all over the place. The other person might have put people block sinks. So there's no consideration for well, not for the other individual even, but for themselves. Just awareness that, look, if I block the sink, it might be a while before the sink's unblocked and I can use it again, and that might ease to life. So a mental health ward can be pressured, and it's a very hard shock, but on that level it can be overcome, because these are all to a certain extent niceties of life. And in my perspective, a mental health ward is a very, very appropriate setting, bar the absence of nature, to deal with our mental health. It's very empty, it's very tatty due to the patients, and there's a coldness to it. But in all of doesn't want to seek an artificial perfection unless it's natural, unless it's nature. It wants to see bricks and mortar and a bed, which is our lives, and all those little problems in that ward that annoy us are just that reflections of our own. But the sparseness is a very healing process. The emptiness, the coldness is where I find myself getting the most of the experience. It's hard to accept that I'm not able to cook for myself as one of the things, because I don't. I'll follow a health conscious diet, so I always have to communicate to the staff how best on this admission can I maintain a level of health that would be, unfortunately, ordering takeaways, or sometimes they can cater for your specific diets. I mean, I know they offer the diets in accordance with halal and kosher, and I think they offer gluten-free options. But the food is very lifeless from the perspective of health that I've understood, and it's not on any of those alternate meal plans they can offer. It's not really compatible with my diet or anything I can adapt as my diet. So those are the main annoyances, but the only real problem is the medication factor for myself. Now, given the law in this country that euthanasia isn't allowed, which implies suicide isn't, which is against the law, and self-harm is a very, very personal, volatile experience of life. Beyond those two elements, and possibly in the third idea that an individual is violent against somebody, I don't really believe ever. Obviously there's going to be some exceptions, but really beyond those, there shouldn't be anybody to ever take medication. It's a very, 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 very brutal, archaic implementation of anything that can be deemed as health. The effects upon the body are shocking. So, a lot of the people in the hospital, they'll just take it and they don't think two things about it, because they've not had that opportunity to go down the path of health in their life. I've been lucky with that awareness in that level, and I've kept my body as in tip-top condition as I could all the way through since and when I take the medication, I really, really feel it. I'm very, very conscious about my body. I have my conspiracy theorist ideas about society and big pharma, who are really the ones who... Consultants don't have a say, they just do their best on what they're given. And I've always tried to, well, not always, but I learned to play a part in the choice of medication, doing my research on the medications and requesting specific ones I believe were in my own best interest in terms of managing my health. You have to take a medication. It's going to hinder your health. What do you want to do about it? So I was proactive. I did some basic research and made requests each time. Learned to make requests for specific medications that would, as possible. But that is something that I really believe needs to be explored, that the forced implementation of of medication, to take someone's liberty away from them isn't nice, and to lock them up in a place like a mental health ward isn't nice. But it's not the end of the world, you know. You're essentially, you admit you're in prison. But the problem is you're in prison, all right, a slightly prettier, nicer prison than what I imagine actual prisons are like. You're also imprisoned within your own body. I guess on some level that can have a very helpful, very present moment effect on of seeing our bodies imprisoned. But in all honesty, it's shocking, because on about the third or fourth admission to hospital, there was a guy that sat opposite me, really on the level guy, really chilled out. Never thought he had a mental health disorder to be opposite me. I mean, I look insane the best part of the time with this beard and the hair. And he started speaking to me, and he said, look, I've been in and out of these hospitals for years now. And I believe that's what happens to a lot of people with mental health disorders. That's what's happened to myself. And the last two admissions to hospital, I tried to trust the doctor's decision making on medication to see if that would get me out of this loop. And in all honesty, they gave me two medications, one that was like the absolute worst. But I thought, you know, where I am, I might give it a try. And on the second one, it was just like a standard medication, but it was a million times worse than the ones I always requested. I say a million, but it was a lot worse than request. And in terms of my physical health, granted, I've taken them at a time in my life when my health was getting away from me anyway. I took 34, 35. So it's around this age that we begin to lose health as human beings. And I had 2 nails in the coffin, so to speak. It was like I might have extended this the childhood vitality in my life for 5-10 years. Courses of medication through my eyes sealed it now. So it's been a real extra process I'm having to deal with on a mental process anyway. And that is that I feel like it's unfair as a human being who just tries their best, who's not perfect but innocent. What's wrong is just natural. A mental health disorder is nature. We all have our own nature according to our lives, which are, again, nature according to humanity's. And the crime why I am imprisoned and then imprisoned is that the nature of our 5,000-year evolution as a collective is quite compatible with my natural expression for life. Now, don't forget, I've never harmed anybody. I've addressed my past problems of suicide and self-harm. So what's the real problem? Why do I still need to be institutions? And for that reason, I look at the world and I think, all right, I see a half logic to this scenario, but I look at the world and I see so much injustice. These two admissions have really taken me. They've put me in a position where I'm looking at the world and I'm seeing all the madness in the world. And I'm thinking the world needs to be in these institutions. The world should be on this medication. And that's the real crux of my mental health. Now, I will add one bit on to that. And that is suffering when you're at your limit. It doesn't matter if you're, I was going to say, being tortured in Guantanamo Bay, which from some of the stories, it becomes a physical, real mental breakdown of the individual. So that's a very, very sensitive. You're experiencing a certain level of suffering in your life. The emotions will cripple you. The emotions make suffering really hard to distinguish. That there are real world problems, and how the suffering comes into our lives is appropriate. But what I'm getting at now is if I imagine that the mental health system never existed, and I just want to add one thing. Respects, I'm well aware that the mental health system here in the UK is far better than 95 or 99% of the world. And if I lived anywhere, I don't know what would have come of me. As much as there are real problems with the UK mental health system. And further adding on to that is a case of, I've asked myself a few times, the mental health system, and that's your main problem in life. What happens if it wasn't there? And it's a case of, I'm fully aware it could have been in. If the help just wasn't there, I would have been alone with my condition. At least I've got something to fight, an injustice, a real injustice when we're talking about affecting the physical body against. I'm well aware if that wasn't there, the terror and the torment that I would be under as a result of many of the elements of my mental health, if I was alone, it could be soul destroying. And in many ways, it could be as bad, if not worse. So in some ways, I half look at the mental health system that they're just taking responsibility for a worse reality by making it very clear to me what the problem is. That the problem is the medication to me. The last 3, 4, 5 admissions, and my life has always been harder. My mental health has always got worse as a result of the admissions. I don't know if that's my perspective, that I have a very fixed identification and that's what I can't deal with, that makes it worse, or if there's a combined effort by the staff to and maybe the medication the problem, but just gives you a tangent to life, and you go on that tangent and you're fighting all the side effects all the while, and you're always going to come back to the main road. And when you come back to the main road, you're probably, plus you've had whatever problems you've experienced on the tangent. So from my perspective, it's not helpful unless there's a far more aware consciousness running the mental health system than I'm aware of. It's the pharmaceutical companies in reality that run the show. There was something else I was going to do on my mind. It slips. The third option. So we've got the mental health system being a real problem and a hindrance to my life. Then we've got the idea that the health system is, from a certain perspective, we're talking about just the UK here, it sort of highlights and addresses an as bad or worse problem that could occur. Now, I've experienced times when I feel alone to the world with my mental health, and it's a very challenging. The third option is that we're not stupid. We have thousands and thousands of years as a collective of people. Okay, we've and please don't shoot me for saying this, but we've eradicated racism from what it was. It still exists, I'm not denying it, but at least here in London, probably the most multicultural place in the world, anybody about 50, I don't get any sense of racism from them. Some of the elderly people, they're stuck in the ways from their past, that they've got their own mental health disorders. But for the whole, racism has been eradicated. Of sexuality and how the LGBT community is so widely accepted. Compared to racism, we're still, I guess, working on that. I mean, I know I can see some of the conditioning from society upon me still in relationship to that. I haven't nothing against anybody, but unfortunately our minds are programmed from growing up. And I'm being honest, but on the whole, we're moving in the right direction, and on the whole, we've taken a problem because we viewed it as a problem. Don't forget, it was only the 90s or 2000s even, when if you were gay or lesbian or subtypes, if you were in the army, you'd have a court-martial and be released. This was like 90s and 2000s. It's unimaginable. Nature. We're natural. This is incomprehensible. And we look at the modern day and we think, yeah, we're actually quite advanced. This 15, 20 years ago, for fuck's sake. And on that realization, you might begin to realize there are still big chunks of society where the mind to the real harm that it's doing to people. And I'm really trying to, well, not trying, I'm just being natural. These live streams are just what's happened. And in that, I'm trying to say, look what, for fuck's sake, people, we need to, totally wipe out racism once and for all. Like, really make that a crime. I mean, it's a crime already, but for what people are getting put away from, you can apply a certain level of understanding to it. If you steal because you're hungry, it's still as bad as stealing because you've stolen some clothes or some electrical equipment. And if you're still closed because you're cold, it's still the same crime as stealing some few meat. The equality isn't there. And then you look at racism, just for opening your mouth, the crimes aren't quite adequate. But then again, understanding from our past, is our past that's the culprit. As we just said, look at the ages of people who are you can not sense, but you get an element of an ignorance to the world, who haven't spent as much of their lives and weren't brought up in a multicultural world and times and a city like I have been lucky to. If I can you be honest to say you've been lucky to live in a multicultural city, and that's why you're for racism, for instance? Can you imagine growing up in a part of the world that was still a few decades back at least, to the world, you know, have the government put firewalls in terms of censorship and what the media puts across? And if you raise your mind to awareness of why it exists in the first place, then you, as much as sense in terms of applying a criminal sentence to somebody, you actually can't apply it because of the world's past. So, you know, we've got judges and we've got courthouses all over the place sentencing people because this guy's murdered someone, this one's raped someone, the other one's done something else. And they're not taking consideration for reality. How much millions has gone on the judicial system and could be spent on just fucking sorting the world out? Understanding that the man who's murdered has had such a hard life that his mind's gone to that way, and he just wants an easy life. We all do. And in his pursuit for his own love for himself, circumstances, opportunities haven't been there for him, and he's had to take opportunities that he could find, and that is of a darker road, and he murders. If you rewind all of that, the logic that's gone into that crime is from love. Same from the man who rapes. Why is it that some people get the opportunity to have sex whenever they want? They experience it to the level they have in their life, sometimes more, sometimes less. But don't forget, society puts sex in our faces left, right and centre. Society puts so much pressure on that man who's raped. And the man who's raped, God knows what torment he's going through as a result of the world. We aren't there as a collective race to have the compassion to see individuals within our collective our collective we're pathetic. We're sluts. We're sluts if we look at society. Sex is used to sell everything. You go on the internet, sex is there for everybody to see, children from a young age. The appreciation for what sex really means for a human being isn't given and taught in this world. Some places, communities around the world in comparison to the capitalist world as a whole. It hasn't received the awareness for what sex really is to the individual, on what fundamental level it's a violation of somebody's rights. How can you really appreciate it when to a certain extent? And on another level is so twisted. It was only 15 or 20 years ago the UK Army was court-martialing people for their sex, and we view ourselves as an enlightened race. We're 2021. If I said to you in the 2000s, early 2000s, do you believe we've evolved on a conscious level that much over 20 years? You'd say, no, not on a conscious level, but actions have been taken. Can you marshalled for their sex now? It'd be unheard of. We've really got to be honest with ourselves about our ignorance to a shared life, a shared harmony, and a shared nature. One that's inclusive. And unfortunately, we all are riding a massive steam train from thousands of years old that's got far too much pressure. Monday to Friday, work, if you're lucky and you don't have two jobs, and if you're lucky and you have a job, and if you're lucky and you're not having to scavenge for food, and if you're lucky and there isn't famine, you're a robot to a massive steam train that's thousands of years old, that's run by money and capitalism in this world, and you're doing that just to feed yourself and your family. Sickness that comes along with that, disposable incomes. And because life is so shit in the first instance, if we're honest, Monday to Friday, for what? To feed your family. We found this luxury of a disposable income. And with that disposable income, rightly so, we try and make our own circumstance better. Rightly so. I can't expect somebody to be a slave Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, work their arse off, barely get any sleep and rest when they go home, look after their family, Monday to Friday, barely see their family. Saturday they're exhausted and they're just trying to put a brave face on for their child, and they might get a bit of rest on Sunday and pop out before they have to go back on Monday. And then you look at the disposable incomes, which is a fucking... You've got to change the name of it. The name alone just... Disposable income, when reality is there for us to see about the world. And what a little bit of consciousness to disposable incomes would do for the whole world. You can't argue with the man that works Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, uses that disposable income to go and blow it on £50 a month Sky Sports. And, you know, the way the sports has been broken up, you need to spend £100 to watch your team play football or whatever sport you follow. The modern day gladiatorial arena, because that's where it's come from. It's just gladiators at the end of the day. If you trace it back, that's the sickness that's applied there. That's what we're watching. Be the better team. With that win, I can go and humiliate my friends. I can come out on top. It's just banter. Oh, look. There's nothing wrong with a drink, but when you're doing it from a sick level of consciousness, and football alone is can be a beautiful sport. But I went mental health, but I mean, God, I'm saying it now. Look, one football player was sold for £200 million 200 million pounds to wear a different colour top and kick a fucking football in a different country. 200 million pounds. How many fucking lives could that have changed in the favelas in Brazil, if not eradicated the best part of them, brought them up to a level of half fucking man. I'm sorry, I can't. I've got a mental health disorder from that. I need antipsychotic fucking medication for that alone. I can't. The rage in me is unparalleled. Football needs to be shut down. Now, in comparison, in relationship to that, look at rugby in the UK. Nobody really supports rugby, but look at what the facility else provide. Sport never needs to go above the level rugby is currently at. Rugby is like perfection in terms of sport in this world. We're like, look, we're the humble, world-class athletes that play this game to the most of its artistic potential and athletic potential. There's money involved. But instead of 200 million, we might sell a player for $1 million or 2 million if we're lucky. I don't know what the player transfer prices are for rugby, but I can't imagine it's anywhere in relationship to 200 million. If we're a sane people, we need to just look at football and say, look, before we're going mad over something that's beautiful, let's all get on board and open our eyes and give ourselves a slap round the head and splash some water on our face and say, whoa, okay, you know, we're making ourselves sick from this art, this beautiful game. We need to reduce this beautiful game from the obscenity, complete obscene behaviour that takes place. And I totally understand it. I'm a football fan. I was for many years, but I've always tried to apply consciousness to it, and I've taken breaks from it. But it's always engrossing, and it's easy to get back into, and it always ignites that past to a certain extent. I still follow a team at a distance, even though it's my mental health that stops me from watching. And from that distance, you know, I totally get it. I see the obscenity of its current place, and I'm fully aware of how that makes someone feel. I'm like, if you just forget all the consciousness, you're like, right, well, I support X team, and like, we need to get more money so we can compete with the big teams. And then this team that was a big team like 50 years ago and then has become a nobody, have just been bought over by, and now they're the richest club in the world overnight. It's just like, what's the point of the game anymore? But I understand it. You understand a club to play better. They want to see the best players play for them. They want to support the best art available. And to do that, they just need more money. They want bigger stadiums. The fans want to go and see them. So I totally get the feeling. I totally get the fans' perspective, but I also totally get how much the sale of one player to another club can make me want to shoot myself. Given my fucking life when I'm being put on because I'm natural. I can't do it. I can't sit there in front of a consultant that watches and follows a football team and isn't an what's the word? passionately advocating the insanity of the game, they can follow it. That's not a problem. But just be real about it when you're talking to people. Just the first thing, yeah, fantastic game, but can't believe we're going to buy X player for worth 10 million. Another element of my psychosis, and I'll be honest, it's my psychosis, but I'm pretty sure another English player sold for 100 million. And I'm watching and I'm reading bits of news here and there on sport, and I keep seeing bits flash up about how much of a joke this player is, how much of a joke that £100 million sale was, because he was a half decent player, and this the spirit up of their fan base. And because they've been buying players for X amount, ridiculous amounts of money for 10, 15 years now, if they were to go out and buy a 10 million valued player, 10th of the value of the player they've just bought, the player might play exactly the same. But it's the mentality. £90 million. That club is an impossibility to buy a £10 million player. It's like, it would be unheard of for them to do that. It's also against the law to a certain extent, if you understand the monetary system. Don't ask me how, I'll explain it another time. But we're an advanced species. We have amazing technology, amazing potential. And we could use that potential to really help the needy. Archaic means of health, whether it's come from good or bad or whatever. And we could wipe out the mental health problems no end. We could the middle of forests, allow people to really connect with nature, provide them real high vitality, nourishing food for their bodies to feel alive, instead of giving them and kill them. Probiotic, antibiotic. We can have pro-psychotic medication instead of antipsychotic medication. Psychosis isn't the problem when you look at the world. That's my 5p, the English version of 2 cents, I guess, or 2p. It's got dark now. I've managed to ride out certain elements of shock I've been carrying in my body. I'm not over the hurdles yet, but I'm moving in the right direction where and when I can. The question is, how are we going to do it? How are we really going to become an enlightened species? From thinking we're an enlightened species when we're not. Do you have psychosis?